Alva Campbell, the terminally ill death row prisoner who survived a botched execution attempt by the state of Ohio on November 15, 2017. Alva Earl Campbell Jr. was born on April 30, 1948. He was convicted of the 1997 murder of 18-year-old Charles Diles in Franklin County. Alva Earl Campbell, one of 6 siblings, he suffered an abusive home life. Between 1959 to 1965, he was placed in 2 different residential treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, 9 separate detention center placements, and 2 different foster homes. His father was committed to the Lima State Hospital for raping one of Campbell's sisters. Campbell's mother was complicit in prostituting Campbell's sisters in exchange for money and alcohol when the girls were teenagers, and one of Campbell's sisters became pregnant at age 15. Campbell and his sisters were finally removed from their mother's care after the children entered a bar and begged for food. Campbell's earliest recorded offenses, according to the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, were 3 counts of armed robbery, 1 of grand larceny, and 1 of shooting with the intent to kill. All of the charges originated in 3 different counties. He was sentenced to an unspecified amount of prison time in June 1968, aged 20. He was convicted of the murder of an adult male in the course of a robbery in November 1972. He was regarded by Franklin County Prosecutor Ron O'Brien as the poster child for the death penalty. On April 2, 1997, Campbell, feigning paralysis and thus in a wheelchair, was transported to court on an aggravated robbery charge. Upon arrival, he overpowered the sheriff's deputy responsible for transporting him, stole her gun, and fled the courthouse loading dock. Campbell then carjacked 18-year-old Charles Diles, forcing him to drive for 3 hours. During that time, several mentions of the pursuit of Campbell by police were made over the radio, prompting Diles to ask Campbell if the person being pursued was him. After 3 hours, Campbell demanded that Diles get on the floor of his truck. Diles refused, prompting Campbell to shoot him twice, killing him. Campbell fled the vehicle before being caught by police shortly after. Campbell was convicted of the aggravated robbery charge for which he was initially in court on October 7, 1997, 6 months after the death of Diles. He was convicted of Diles' murder and sentenced to death on April 10, 1998, just over a year after the killing. In an order published by Ohio Governor John Kasich on May 1, 2017, Campbell's execution was rescheduled from September 13, 2017, to November 15, 2017, at the prescribed execution time of 10 a.m. His clemency hearing was scheduled for October 12, 2017. The parole board returned a unanimous vote against clemency on October 20, 2017. As the execution approached, the state never explained how it planned to get around this problem. But officials did agree to provide Campbell a wedge-shaped pillow that would prop him up on the gurney so that he could breathe, at least until the state stopped his breathing for good. The execution had been delayed for nearly an hour that morning as staff reportedly examined Campbell's arms and legs one last time. Then, just before 11 a.m., the protesters got word that witnesses were being led to the death chamber. The execution would soon be underway. One by one, They struck a large homemade bell, brought by Abraham Bonowitz, a veteran organizer with Ohioans to stop executions, and head of the new group death penalty action. Bonowitz constructed the bell from a retired gas canister. Its sound was startlingly loud by design. After the last execution in Lucasville, relatives of the condemned man had said they could hear the bell inside the prison. It was comforting to know someone cared. After being sent to the execution room on the morning of November 15, 2017, Campbell's execution was called off due to the nature of his health problems preventing the lethal injection from occurring. Executioners were unable to successfully find a vein in which to insert the IV which would contain the lethal drugs. His execution was rescheduled for June 5, 2019. Ohio corrections personnel were aware prior to the failed execution attempt that Campbell was gravely ill and physically debilitated. Campbell's lawyers unsuccessfully argued in court that Campbell's medical condition had compromised his veins, making IV access problematic and creating the risk that any lethal injection execution would be unconstitutionally tortuous. Lead counsel, Assistant Federal Public Defender David Stebbins, warned that the execution could become a spectacle if prison staff were unable to find a suitable vein. Calling Campbell an old and frail man who is no longer a threat to anyone, Ohio's attempt to put Campbell to death was delayed for nearly an hour as executioners assessed his veins. Witnesses then watched for another half hour as prison personnel used an ultraviolet light to probe Campbell's arm for a vein, repeatedly sticking his arms and legs. When he was stuck in the leg, Campbell threw his head back and appeared to cry out in pain. After failing 4 times to find a suitable vein in which to set an intravenous execution line, Ohio called off the execution and Governor John Kasich granted Campbell a temporary reprieve. The botched execution attempt was the 4th time in 12 years that executioners in Ohio had prolonged difficulty in setting an execution IV, and the 2nd time in which an execution attempt was halted. The failure highlights the growing problem states face in attempting to execute an aging and increasingly infirm death row population. The failed execution of Alva Campbell was historic. It was the 3rd time a person has survived an execution in the United States since 1946. Yet it was the 2nd time a man has left the gurney alive in Ohio in less than 10 years. The same thing happened at the Lucasville prison in 2009 after the attempted execution of Romel Broom. For 2 hours on September 15, 2009, execution team members tried and failed to find a vein in order to carry out his lethal injection. At one point, they took a 45-minute break, then tried again. It was only after 18 failed attempts to insert the IV lines that then Governor Ted Strickland stopped the execution. A prison spokesperson would later praise Broom for being extremely cooperative and respectful during the ordeal. He actually attempted to help the team find an access point. Campbell, 69, was afflicted with lung cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, respiratory failure, prostate cancer, and severe pneumonia. He relied on a colostomy bag, needed oxygen treatments 4 times a day, and required a walker for even limited mobility. He was found unresponsive in his cell at Chillicothe Correctional Institution in Ross County in the pre-dawn hours of March 3, 2018, and was pronounced dead at a local hospital at 5:24 a.m. Thank you for watching Death Row.